We'll start off with the joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen, Capital Planning Committee, and Finance Committee. Discussion and action on public safety building and special town meeting warrant. The chairman of the FinCom has requested that we hold off on doing Article 1 until we get through the other articles first, so if there's no objection from the board on that.
Very quickly, and just get a brief explanation of what those articles are.
Okay, so you're looking for explanation from us, Gil?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
What exactly are the repairs we're making?
Do you want to have them convene their...
Oh, yeah, well, you're in a joint meeting, yeah. Mr. Wise is correct. You should call yours to order because you have a quorum present.
Okay.
And same with Cap.
Yeah.
Call to order the finance committee meeting.
Yeah.
I second it. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. Does Capital, Brendan, is it just you or are the other members of your committee? You're on Capital? Okay. And all right, so you have a quorum. All right, so if you could call yours to order as well.
Call to order.
All right, thank you.
So the repairs being made at the South School?
There was a water leak there a little over a year ago. We received some insurance proceeds and did some remediation. There's some additional repairs that are needed, including the electrical panel, which is outdated and out of code as I understand it.
So legal expenses, I think you gave us an explanation. On
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And then the canopy over the town hall, I believe we previously funded a study, I think, to explore what we could do there.
Yeah.
Has that money been expended, and then this is the result of that?
The study came back with a couple different options.
Yep.
One was this, which is a canopy, kind of an overhang. And then there were two other options, which essentially expanded the square footage of the building, and those costs, I believe, at the time were between $400,000 and $700,000. So this was the least costly of the options, and what the board had discussed last week. But I don't know if the board wants to add any comment to that.
Well, I don't think this was to put the canopy on. I thought the board that last week talked about the door downstairs. We knew that the canopy was going to cost anywhere between $400,000 and $600,000 or $400,000 and $700,000. Is this $100,000, in your opinion, going into some sort of an account to build up to that amount?
No.
Because $100,000 is not going to put a canopy out there.
Well, I believe it would for the canopy. What it wouldn't do is the expansion, which was calling for an additional meeting room and space. That's where the 400 to 600 was, as I recall it.
That was to enclose the front.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And this is for what?
It
A
would
canopy?
it would put on a canopy, which is what we discussed last week.
I don't believe I discussed that. I believe that the front door was my discussion last week. The front door, that it's been inoperable for several months, and it is still inoperable. The lock doesn't work. Between Debbie and Marcia, they have to climb up on the top of the door to hit some sort of a button or something in order to lock it or unlock it.
I wasn't aware of that. That's the first I'm hearing of it. I thought what you were referring to last week was to deal with the drainage issues.
That's two separate issues, Joseph. Mr. Iafredi, I thought I saw him come in. Did I see him?
Downstairs, he stepped downstairs.
He did. I want to know what this $100,000 is going to do. Put a canopy. What's a canopy? Like a little...
An overhang, an
Overhang?
awning. Yes, because that's what I thought we were talking about last week was the drainage. At no point did we talk about the door not functioning correctly.
I believe I did specifically say door last
Okay.
week. I know I did. Because I was talking about the door. I wasn't talking about a canopy. When I talked about the front enclosure, I meant the entire enclosure is what I was discussing.
Until Bob gets here, do you want to talk about the last item?
Sure.
And then, what is the use of the stormwater funds for?
I can't speak to that. That was a late addition from the health department.
Yeah, I believe every year he is allocated an amount of money, and Mike, you might be able to talk a little bit about this. It's an amount of money that comes from the state to the town, and it gets allocated into the stabilization fund, which is already existing, and I believe that's the way the stormwater infrastructure fund and allocation work. So it's mandated by
Yeah, yeah, please.
Michael King, Town Treasurer. So this is really, although it's from the health agent, it's more of a housekeeping accounting type article. He received funds that he would like to place in the Stormwater Stabilization Fund, but when you bring in revenues, you can't place them directly in a stabilization fund without a majority vote. So that's what he's looking to do in this case. So essentially he's looking to encumber those funds for future purposes related to stormwater.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, Gil?
No, we're good with those.
Okay.
I don't know if you want
Yeah,
to-
Bob, do you mind coming up? There's some conversation. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, because I wasn't, but I guess the front door, there's some functionality issues with it.
The front door of this building?
Yes, the main door, the one that we use to gain entrance.
Occasionally there's a lock problem, but it's an adjustment, and we take care of it occasionally when that happens, but I can look into it.
Okay, but you weren't aware of any major issue with it?
It's the first I heard of it.
Okay. Mrs. Smith, what would you like to do?
What would I like to do? I'd like to get the front door fixed is what I'd like to do, so the girls don't have to climb up and adjust whatever they're adjusting.
There is a clip on the top. Sometimes it doesn't retract,
Right.
which stops the door from closing.
That's what I was
You just have
told.
to touch it and it falls back in place, so I'll take care of it myself tomorrow.
All right, this $100,000, that's the request here. Mr. Pacheco was saying that that is an awning over the door. I was talking about the door, number one, because I had just heard about the situation with the door, okay?
I think we can fix the door for less than that.
You better be able to fix the door for less than $100,000, I'll tell you that much. But that's not near enough to do what we wanted to do out front.
We had that.
So where did this canopy come from?
We had an architect do a couple of renderings, if you remember,
Right.
several months ago. One was for a roof over the entryway, and one was for a second level in a closed-in structure, so we could utilize the second floor spaces, maybe more meeting room area. We did get a couple of preliminary estimates, and I think I shared them with you. It was preliminary estimate just from the architect was about $200 to $300 just to put a roof over it, and it might double, close to $600,000 to do something like a two-story
The enclosure, correct.
So as far as your question, where did the $100,000 come from? I'm not sure. I would imagine we would probably revisit this project and get some more plans done, and then have some bids brought in to see where we would be at. But we do need a covering on that door because you're in the elements when you're trying to access the doorway. So it no longer works with the drainage situation we have and the ice. Being on the north side of the properties, the north side, it ices up and it freezes all the time. If you might have been here this morning, you noticed there was ice there, even though we didn't have a rainstorm last night. So.
All right, so what is your suggestion with this $100,000? I mean, there's an article here for $100,000. I was talking about a door. Now you say you can fix this door. You sure you can fix it? Because evidently this has been going on for quite some time. And I was just told this, Joe.
Well, whether it can be fixed or it needs to be replaced, it's a locking mechanism. It's not going to be a lot of money.
I thought they already put a different lock on that door.
The locking mechanism they did was the handicap mechanism, the electronic mechanism. So we've played around with it several times since I've been here. So, but it was my understanding that $100,000 was going to be put in place for a project that was going to cover this area. Whether it's enough money or too much money, I think we still need to do some work on that.
All right.
Does that have to be transferred into an account then that's going to be set?
I would say.
Yes, if it passes.
Because if it's not enough to cover it, then could this be a start of the amount that we need?
So I'm not sure where the number originated from, but it would definitely be a start to a project that we dearly need here, and that would be at least to cover the entranceway, if not go with a bigger project and create more space for the building.
What account would it be put in, Gil?
If you're doing a stabilization account, you'd have to create a stabilization account similar to what we did for the public safety and other projects in the past.
And that's missing from this. We have to
Correct.
have
And that would be missing.
Create a fund.
Yeah, to fund it.
Right. I think we have enough on the other articles.
Okay.
I don't want to
Yeah.
delay the.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
So you want to start with one then, Gil? All right. Do
Well,
you-
I guess you guys could just give us Gil Aligi, Finance Committee. I was just wondering if we could get an explanation of what the status is of the Public Safety Building Committee and what the plan is going forward.
Sure. Who wants to start speaking for the building committee?
I can speak, and Bob, you can fill in some of the blanks. So as it was voted on by the board a few meetings ago, we have hired a owner's project manager, Mr. Pomeroy. Is Ricky? Oh, he is here. Okay. Who has been working with Bob and myself so far. The project as a whole is still in the beginning stages. Mr. King came to me one day and informed me that if we would like to use the funds that were previously set aside, the $2.5 million for the project, we have to have a town meeting where it's moved out of the stabilization fund and into an account that can be accessed. Am I speaking correctly, Mike?
Yeah, you need appropriation for town meeting.
Right. When Bob and I found that out, we talked to Rick. We decided to put a hold on the project until that action took place. So until town meeting made the decision to appropriate money for the project out of that stabilization fund, the project cannot proceed. Other non-financial items have begun to move forward. Mr. Pomeroy has gone out for RFP for design services, correct, Rick? In the event that once money is allocated, we can continue to move forward with the project and select an architect to do a feasibility study for the police department and do operation study of their operations. So that is in a nutshell. And Bob, if there's any other information you want to fill in, sort of where the project is.
Yeah, there's not much more I can add to that, other than the fact that the building committee has not reconvened since we had the OPM on board, solely because we're still trying to put some information together. We don't have enough information to bring back to have a full meeting. So we've been working through with the two chiefs and Graham and myself to try to get the process moving. Our goal was not to stall with one piece of the project. Our goal was to have multiple things going at the same time so we don't lose time, meaning the architect, the OPM, the acquisition of the land. So this is what we're trying to accomplish, and in order for us to move to the next stage, according to Mr. Pomeroy, we need to engage an RFQ and then ultimately hire an architectural firm to start the design process.
And a little bit about the land process and what we're looking at. As has been discussed with the selectmen in the past, the number one site, and with the building committee, the number one site we're looking at right now is Borden Colony. We haven't heard any objections, any major objections to that idea. And with, to give a little bit of background for everybody else, with Borden Colony, the town is looking at doing a land swap where we take 10 acres of the preserved land at Borden Colony in exchange for 10 acres of private land, and making that private land conserved. It'll become town conservation land, and then that 10 acres at Borden Colony will then be buildable. We have reached out to a couple engineering firms to see what it would cost to do a meets and bounds of the 10 acres, approximately 10 acres at Borden Colony. That is needed to eventually, when we go before the state legislator to request the exchange, that meets and bounds of the property needs to be submitted when we do the conservation easement exchange or conservation exchange. Other than Border and Colony, the building committee identified a couple other properties, and as it might be known that we also advertised to solicit any offers from residents who might have property. That did not field anything specific. Another resident came into town hall a couple weeks ago claiming they had property. I've not heard back from that resident, but in looking at that parcel, it's in a heavy residential area that would not be favorable to this project. We've also looked at a piece of property on Pleasant Street owned by Mr. Aruda, Joy Aruda. He has come to the building committee and talked to the building committee about that piece of property. We have not explored that further because of the Border and Colony option. The building committee also identified a piece of property at Terror Way, which unfortunately just settled. It was on the market, and we did not make offer going forward with that. Again, because the idea is Border and Colony would be the least costly option for building on.
Yep.
Can you explain the, I guess, the procedure for going through this? My concern is that at what point do we get buy-in from the citizens that we want to do a public safety building before we expend all this for the studies and the design?
So the public buy-in option, an explanation to the residents, comes through the town meeting. This project was underway before I started with the town. I was not aware of any non-buy-in by the public. I was under the impression that because this project had already started, that discussion had already taken place among the town.
As you probably know, Gil, this all started with an idea to expand upon the fire department. It was our intention to try to put a second floor in the fire department, so we went through the process. We had a feasibility study done for that, and it became evident that that facility is beyond repair, if you will. It's too far antiquated to make any sense to expend any money on it. From there, we came back and we decided that through that feasibility study, we decided the best course of action was to construct a new facility. Seeing that the police department's in the same building, it made sense to include the police department. Part of the process here and part of the RFQ for the architect will be an additional feasibility study that they will compile, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, for the police department. So we'll be able to bring a whole package to the voters, and they can see what we have, what we need, and how much it's going to cost to construct a new building.
So do we do that before we go to the town meeting to approve the funding, or is that all?
The problem is we don't have any, as I understand it, any other funding authorized yet to move forward with what Bob is speaking to right now.
Right. The idea is to have as much information to bring to the public at town meeting before we go to borrow to build the building.
So that's the $200,000 you're requesting?
Correct.
For the studies you talked about.
Yes. And that I hope that everybody got a copy of my memo that I sent out that breaks down that cost. I have copies here available if anybody would like to see them. And then we have Mr. Pomeroy here as well to answer any questions about that process. Ideally, I think the building committee talked about having bids in hand when we went to town meeting, and that would have given us the most accurate number. But that was where the $1 million to build that bid came from. And Mr. Pomeroy suggested that if we go with this other option, it's not. And Rick, you can. Yeah, please. But I'll paraphrase, and you can undo my paraphrase. But this is the most amount of information for the least amount of expense to come to a town meeting to say, hey, it's going to cost X number of dollars to build this building, here is the fire department feasibility study that was done back in 2018-19. Here's the police department feasibility study that was done. Here's some pictures of what a station could look like, et cetera, and please feel free.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Richard Pomeroy from Pomeroy Associates. What we see most communities doing is following let's call it the baby step. We're taking one step at a time, and the first step is a feasibility study. There were some desires to consider bringing to town meeting bids in hand, as Graham had discussed earlier. The problem with that is that to have bids in hand, it's a substantial investment by the community to have the design, all of the research and studies done, have the design completed, and go through the process. And it takes, for a project of this size, from beginning to end, 10 to 12 months to have all of your bids in hand. As I said, that's a substantial investment of time and money. What we see most communities following is a feasibility study first, which would identify, would research the departments, and I say departments, we've already completed one study for the fire department, but we have to do the same thing for the police department, and understand the growth projections for the police department, and then take the two programs and start developing space needs assessments to accomplish the goals of the department. And from those assessments, we will start to form the footprint or the plan of the building, and then start identifying the size and looking at adjacencies and the shared spaces to come up with an economical floor plan that services both departments. That process, we would bring that through early schematic design, and schematic design is showing you not only the floor plans, but building elevations and site research. From all of that information, we can have schematic estimates completed, which will tell you what the building and project will cost. So that investment is far less than having bids in hand, and we feel very comfortable that we can have that completed once the designer's on board and ready for fall town meeting. So as was mentioned earlier, we're already in the RFQ process, a request for qualifications for the architects, and we're receiving packages very shortly. And so we decided to, while we were having these discussions, we would work on a parallel track and try to get as much of that process completed, selecting the architect before we were approved to proceed. It doesn't cost you anything. Basically what we're doing is getting all of the ducks lined up so that assuming that we're approved to move forward, we can start right away without having to go through the selection process. So what you have in front of you is an outline of what those costs, what we expect they to be for the feasibility aspect of that. All of that information is not wasted. All of that information goes into the final product. So this portion of the project would have to happen whether you had bids in hand to present or took what I call the baby steps, meaning feasibility study first, then we get town buy-in on the total project, and then we move forward.
Dan, Mr. Andrews, I know.
Yes, Dan Andrews, I'm on the building committee, and what Graham had mentioned about the building committee hiring his firm is not true, because the building committee didn't hire him. It was at our last meeting, if you recall, we had kind of a surprise look in our face that, we left the meeting before discussing Gordon Colony, and Mark Pacheco sent in Mary to let us know what we needed to do for Gordon Colony to get that transferred out of agricultural. And when we had left that meeting, Graham had mentioned that you were putting it out for advertisement, that his contract for the repairs for the existing fire station work, that his contract was null and void. So you had to re-advertise it. So when he was sitting in our meeting, I asked, what's he doing here? And he said, oh, we hired him.
So the building committee didn't hire him. It wasn't his agreement, and I'm sorry, you're standing here. His agreement didn't come in front of the building committee. You said that it went to Bob, you, fire chief, police chief. So I just want to make that clear.
Right.
So we're in a position here that I made it clear at the meeting that I think we're doing the same thing over again as we did in the fire station on the repair. We spent $97,000. He was our project manager on that job, and it was within 3 weeks. Now this went on for months. 3 weeks of the presentation that we received, that you received, that's when we received it. The building committee was asked to pick which plan we liked. Through the whole process, we were dumbfounded because each meeting went on, we kept asking, where's the plan that you're supposed to come up with? And we weren't getting it. And then 3 weeks before it was coming to presentation in front of the selectmen, that's when we got we saw what you saw. Throughout that process, it was a feasibility study. And I mentioned that several times, that this is a feasibility study. And we did hire, and we did agree that we go along with that architectural or construction firm to do the feasibility study because they were small enough where they could actually put a bid in to do the project. Throughout the whole process, they were spending so much time on items that I was questioning, and I was told that these items are going to be useful when we do the construction. I said, what construction? We don't even know if we are going to be doing the construction. It was just, in my opinion, from start to finish, I was as confused from the beginning as I was to the end, and almost where I am today. And other members, they can speak for themselves that are on the building committee, but whenever I received John Donahue's email or text that $500,000 or $600,000 is being requested, and I'm being told that the building committee is, approving this stuff. Absolutely not true. If the building committee discussed funds, it would have been vented out at that meeting. And trust me, it would have been vented out. And I think we could have eliminated a lot of confusion. Roger Schulte spent $95,000 on Locust Street for architectural drawings before he went to the town for land takings. Everybody on Locust Street who wanted the land takings, where we needed to do land takings, said, you're not taking my land. There was so much disruption. He said, well, the heck with it, I'm not going to do drainage. You don't want it, and I don't want it. So he has plans for $95,000 sitting in a drawer. Just like we have a feasibility study for a fire station that, in my opinion, was spent more than just what a feasibility study should be. So I just want to, we're all in favor of a fire station and police station. We agreed, the building committee agreed to hire an engineer. Mr. Iafredi was going to put out requests for 3 bids for an engineer from Gordon Bell. I did all the research and all the plans, the deeds, so I have the land that's going to be transferred over. And that's where we are. That's where we are. Mr. Pomeroy came in at our last meeting, and when, knowing that he was on board, the contract was signed, we did say that let's go ahead and get this thing advertised. But I think, as he mentioned earlier, at no cost to the town, at no time was funds ever mentioned. gonna cost $500,000. And we don't even know if we're gonna be going to Borden College. I don't know. Mary, the night she came into the building committee, she said, if we don't drag your feet, you drag your feet, and we don't get the paperwork, we don't get all the information we need before budget time, you might get bumped. So, you know, we could have plans drawn, gonna take 12 months, well, it could take 18 months to get Borden College. Now, fire chief's here, members of the building committee are here. I was, and, you know, again, speaking for myself, being on the building committee, not putting words in anybody's mouth, but I just think we put the cart before the horse in the last project. When Mr. Pomeroy was hired, he was hired as a town representative. That's the way I looked at it. He was brought in to oversee our feasibility study with the potential possibility of construction. And the person that came in to do the feasibility study was more worried about getting the construction job than he actually was in the feasibility study, in my opinion. And I mentioned in one of the meetings, and I even said, doesn't this go out to bid? I mean, you're doing a feasibility study, but on the other hand, you're saying that what you are doing now is going to help you when you do the construction. Yeah, we need all the information. The information's not going to go bad. So, I just wanted to put that out there. So when we talk about building committees, there's a, I don't know, 8-member. We have a great building committee. But if there's any funds that is ever going to come out and be approved, I think it should go to the building committee. And then we won't have this confusion. Because, trust me, it would have been vented at the building committee about coming up with $500,000. It was never mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Wiles.
I'm not really too sure what the authority of the building committee is. Again, I was introduced to this project as it already started. I don't know if the building committee has the authority to authorize spending. From what I understand, it does not. And I believe, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned to me that any money that has to be spent should probably come before the Board of Selectmen. Also, as far as I know, it must have been either my first month here or the first 2 months here. I've only been here 3 months. When the building committee met for the first or second time after I started, I believe I walked away knowing that we had to meet with Mr. Pomeroy because he was working on the previous project. At that time, I did not know what the involvement of that project was with this project. That project being the fire department. When Bob and I met with Mr. Pomeroy, he was very honest and forthright with us that the project has changed substantially, that we actually need to go back out and rebid the project management services, which is what we did. I believe we informed the building committee through email at the time that this process was taking place. And I don't believe the building committee was reconvened until, and Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the building committee was convened until after we went out and advertised the RFQ for the project management services. However, the board selectmen were involved, and I believe emails were sent out to the building committee about the RFQ process for the project management services.
I think, to Mr. Andrea's point, ultimately this board has financial jurisdiction, but I think when we establish a building committee, we look for the entire committee to be involved in the process. And I will only speak for myself, but when we rehired Mr. Pomeroy, the question was asked if there were any objections. And when it was said that there wasn't, I assumed, and I probably shouldn't have assumed, but I assumed that it had been vetted through the full building committee, not a portion of the building committee. So when we establish a standing committee for a particular purpose, they should, in my opinion, be used for the entire process, not piecemeal. As you're speaking, Mr. Chairman, it does come to my memory that I did put out to the full building committee and
probably the first or second meeting, that I was conducting this RFQ, that we were going to be reviewing the proposals, and that anybody who wanted to participate on this could. And I could probably dig up some emails that speak to that same, if there's any questions about the building committee not being involved. It is not my intention to handle this project by myself or limit it to town staff. There's a building committee for a reason. And the more work that they do, the less work I have to do. And it makes no sense that I would do it on my own whatsoever, especially being here just 3 months.
Okay.
Just
Mr.
one
Andrews.
last thing, the building committee, no building committee or no committee in the town of Raynham should have the authority to approve any funds. It's our job to, in this case, from what I was told, it's our job to oversee the process, find locations, bring it all forward, bring all the information forward, including if it was ever brought up that we were gonna spend $600,000 or $500,000 for engineering. Yes, you did say you put it out for
RFQ, yeah. As well as
You didn't tell us
advertising.
you were hiring you weren't gonna let the building committee review all the proposals, that you were gonna hire who you felt, or whoever, I don't even know who was involved in the hiring process. And again, I don't wanna go there. All I'm saying is I just don't wanna be involved with, I was kind of embarrassed when I got John Donahue's email saying that, you'd be crazy? You're gonna allow $500,000 to go out? We don't even know if the town's gonna approve a fire station? That's insane. I mean, it's just, if that was ever brought up in our meeting, it totally would have been said, no. Let's see if we're gonna get let's see if, yes, everything that they said is 100% true about. We did say that we're gonna travel different paths to speed this thing up a little bit. And maybe that's, my fault being on the committee, but when no money is brought up or spoken about, and it's decided upon, and it's not discussed, and it's decided that that's what we need town to vote for, I just think, the committee needs to put their opinion in.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that there's been a big misunderstanding, if I may. The initial cost that was discussed and bantered around was actually at your request, because you had told us at the last meeting that you wanted to bring bids in hand to the town. You weren't going to discuss anything until you had bids in hand. And so we put together a cost, just because that's not, and I tried to explain to you that that's not the normal process. That normally a feasibility study would be completed, and you said, I don't want contingencies, I don't want anything, I want bids in hand. So I provided a cost of what it would cost from a projected cost, what it would cost for engineering, to give you bids in hand. That's all we did.
You left us out of that.
But that's all we did.
But you left, well, that's all you did, but here we are today, the building committee is not part of bids in hand.
Because
Yes, you did say, and I did say that if we're gonna go to the town meeting, you mentioned several times on the first project that you feel very good by giving towns back money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if you're giving towns back money, then if it was overbid, and you're giving them back funds. I thought, and I said, I'm in the residential side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody gets a bid, I don't have to pay for the bid. In some cases, you might have to, and I know you said, well, commercial's a little different. Well, if we have to pay for $500,000, it's not a bid that we're getting architectural drawings, we're getting the whole 9 yards.
Exactly, and that's what I was trying to convey through you, Mr. Chairman. What I was trying to convey was that in order to get bids in hand, you have to make a substantial investment in the design of the project. In all of your investigations, you need, if I may, you need to create a set of bid documents that the contractors would read and put a price together to do that. In order for those bid documents to be completed, you have to hire an architect to complete those. And So the cost and the investment that you would put into paying the architect to create those bid documents is what we're talking about right now. We're not talking about construction costs. We're talking about the cost to get you to the point where you have general contractors who have bid the job. The previous study, with all due respect, there's been a big misunderstanding as how that previous study evolved. And very early on in that process, we felt that going down the route of making additions to that building or repairing that building was not a sound investment. However, the committee directed us to continue pursuing that and come up with a solution that would meet the needs of the department, albeit the building was deficient. So that's the direction that we followed. You may not have agreed with that, but I do believe that it was the committee's decision to follow that route. Now, we work for you, you're absolutely correct, but we're also following the direction and the decisions of the committee. If the committee had accepted the fact that we had some serious concerns with that building from the beginning, then we never would have gone through that full feasibility study. But this evolved from input and feedback back from the committee. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think that we gained a lot of great information. And the bottom line is, we're making advice to the community not to make any more investment in that building, and to move on and to make an investment in a sound building that's going to last you for years. So it was time well spent. And there was a cost associated with that, but there's a cost of doing business. The information that we obtained from that, we can roll it over and use it in the new study, in the new analysis. Excellent information. It's all about the department, how the department operates, the needs of the facility so they can operate. All of that gets rolled in. Now we just need to do the same for the police department and then prepare a design so that we can estimate it to tell you how much it's going to cost.
Well, a week ago, the email that I received from Mr. Donahue was that you were putting in for $600,000. Today I walked in and somebody said it's down to 100-something thousand. Again, the building committee doesn't know anything about the funds. That's number one. And if we're going to spend another $100,000 for another feasibility study, I just think there's got to be a little more. Maybe there's a lack of communication between our understanding on my part, and maybe not asking the right questions in the building committee meetings. But I'm just. I would say before we spend that kind of money on another study, that yes, we did say we would like to go to the town with a budget. Let's go to the town with what is this going to cost us? The police chief, the fire chief, building inspector, the members of the committee went and visited, I think, 5 police and fire stations. So we have an idea of what these things cost us. We have an idea of what is going to work for the town and what's not going to work for the town. To spend that kind of money up front without having a town vote, that's where I'll leave it.
Mr. Donahue.
Mr. Chairman, I've been cited 3 times, so I figured I'd get up and give my side of the story. I'm sitting in the back very patiently.
You're not supposed to be here.
I know, I know, and I'm missing my next meeting. I have to agree with Mr. Palmer. I think that there has been, in general, a misunderstanding here, and that is, quite simply, I happened to be here last week on government study business, not on this topic at all. And towards the end of my time here last week, we reviewed the warrant. You asked me if the dates worked. I took a look at the warrant, and I saw you'd be requesting an authorization from the town to spend up to $2,750,000. You were going to unencumber $2,750,000 for the purposes of the public safety building, which to me, I think my next question is, what's the purpose for that? And the response was that either from somebody on the board or maybe I got it offline, the discussions I've had have all kind of run into each other. But the word I got was that you wanted to do the town was proposing to do a detailed architectural and engineering study to the tune of up to $1.2 million. And that, to me, set me off on a quest and resulted in Dan in the email. Now, I don't think I accused the building committee of coming up with that number. I don't know where that number came from. And I don't know why there was an article on the draft warrant for that authorization, but I think what I'm hearing is we're all on the same page now, there is going to be an article for a couple $100,000, which will get the second feasibility study and a conceptual design plan from which the building committee and the project manager and board can go to town meeting and say, here's what we're proposing, here's where we're proposing it, here's what we think it's going to cost. For me as a taxpayer, spending $200,000 on that is a lot better than spending 1 point whatever million on plants that could conceivably sit on a shelf somewhere. So that was my only contention that I made last week, was why such a long step towards a project that may or may not come to fruition. And let me finish by, as I said I'd be brief, finish tonight by the way I started last week. I'm 100% supportive of a public safety building, and I don't think there's anybody in this room that isn't. I think we just all want to make sure we do it the right way.
Thank you,
Dan, does
Mr.
that
Dunn.
answer your...
Oh, most definitely.
Okay, because it was never meant to be a slight on the
Yeah.
building committee, the board of selectmen, or
I think
project manager. As an aside, when I said it set me off on a quest, I did a lot of research. And I'll tell you one thing that I found. I found a number of communities who had nothing but good things to say about Pomeroy Associates. A couple who have gone back to the well twice, I believe.
3 times.
Town of Norwell, police station and library, Chatham.
We've
So-
used them before.
You got the right guy, I think.
I think part of the confusion, Mr. Donahue, was I was part of conversations where I was told we had to allow the expenditure from that fund, which hadn't been triggered yet, which is what that article was. Subsequent conversations at board meetings were when dollar amounts started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
The additional $200,000 was a request that I had made of the board to add additional funds to that account, as we've been doing piecemeal throughout this process.
Consistent with your process, which I fully support.
Exactly. And I think where, as you said, Mr. Donahue, we went off the tracks a little bit was the amount of money that was going to be potentially expended and the purpose for that potential expenditure.
Yes. I think we're all in agreement.
Yes.
It's just a little bit painful to get there.
So.
Good?
Dan, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question.
If you could, because I know Janet doesn't know you.
Sorry.
Your name and address.
Yeah, Daniel McNally, 269 North Main Street. My only question or concern, and I am new to all of this, I joined the Finance Committee a few months ago, kind of getting my bearings about everything. But it seems to me that there are a lot of other towns that have done something similar. And my opinion would be that we might want to consider going to the town before we do really any of this and say, we want to build a new fire station, police station. And again, like everyone else has said, I'm fully in support of all that. Your building's horrible. You need to do something about it. But the issue I have is that, do we even need to expend the $165,000 beforehand, before we even get approval? Why spend anything? If we can go to the town, the people of the town, and say, we've looked around, most of these places have cost us $30 million to spend. We want some kind of approval from the town, the people, saying, yes, this is okay, we're all on board for a new fire and police station. And then we piecemeal put these warrants out to get the money to move the project forward. We find the land, we nail that down. Then we take the next step and say, okay, now that we've nailed that down, we can get through, we know where it's gonna go, so now let's get the designs and everything we need, and kind of do that piecemeal to make sure everyone in the town is on board with these projects. And that would be my only suggestion.
Great, thank you. Was there anybody? Bob?
It's a great idea, but in order to get to the next phase, to bring something to the town, we need to show them something. I think this minimal amount of money is going to give us the information we can share with them, so they can see that we need a new apparatus bay. We can see we need more cells. We can see we need more office space. Those are the things that this expenditure is going to create for us. I think everyone's on the same page. I mean, if the board wants another meeting of the building committee, I think everyone on the building committee, we're all on the same page, minus another meeting to talk about numbers. And the last thing I want to say is, Graham really took the ball and ran with us, and he made sure we didn't trip over a couple of things that we could have tripped over, and he pulled back a couple of times, especially with the OPM, and brought it back out to bid, because the original contract we signed was specifically just for the fire station and not for a dual building. So, like I said, our conversation tonight got a little bit off tangent, I think, but I think everyone's on the same page, and if you need reassurance from the building committee, I think that can happen in a short amount of time.
Board?
Well, I read the draft warrant and then the current warrant. Mr. Pomeroy, if I may, please. The $200,000 that we have here slated to cover the costs associated with the planning and whatever, is that going to bring it up to bid?
No.
What is it going to give us?
It's going to give us a conceptual design of a building, so you're going to know the size of the building. It's going to assist in the site selection. It's also going to prepare some conceptual site engineering so that we know what's going to be involved with developing the site, and it'll give us an opinion of probable cost as to what the total project will cost.
So a guesstimate.
It's not, we don't like to use the word
Well, I'm
guesstimate,
sorry, that's a
but,
bad word.
yeah.
Use a bad word
A
then.
schematic design estimate.
Okay.
This estimate will be based upon the level of information we have at that time.
Okay.
So we'll be including contingencies to get us to the
Better check, Barb.
This is what we're really funding
Yes. That's correct, yeah. It's a, that's just a little bit, because there's a lot of unknowns. And so I suggested having a, contingency there, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I didn't put together a number where we get the bid, but, it's going to be more.
Rick, if you
I'm
want to
sorry.
continue with that, sorry.
I'm
Yes.
sorry about that.
See,
But this would be something that we could bring to the townspeople and say, it will cost approximately, or maybe up to a certain amount of money.
what our goal is, at the completion of this phase, is to go to the community with a sound number. It will not exceed this value.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Ms. Riley, any questions?
No, I still have a problem with expending the funds when it really hasn't, the project hasn't gotten any approval from town meeting. I mean, the only thing that's gone before town meeting at all has been in addition to the existing fire stations. This is a completely different project, which we all agree we need, but it's a completely different project at a location that we're not even sure where that's going to be at this point. I don't know how much it delays the project if we were to hold on this article until the annual town meeting, when maybe the building committee could come back with at least maybe a location or a little bit more information to go forward. And at that point, an annual town meeting, you'll get a lot more people than you do at a special town meeting in the middle of winter. So that is my concern. Mr. Pomeroy, what could be done, or how can the project go forward if we delayed until the annual town meeting in May to expend any additional funding?
We would just
Be at a total standstill?
we would
or-
be putting off the project for that period of time. Our goal, what we could give you for annual town meeting would be a guesstimate.
Bad word, you said.
Yeah, I know. I don't like to use it myself, but the reason I call it a guesstimate is because until the programming is complete for the police department and the space
You don't
need
know.
is defined, we don't know how big the building is. So I have some ideas. I have a pretty good darn idea where this is going to be. I do this for a living. I've been doing this for 16 years now. We've done over 40 municipal facilities. So I have a good idea where we're going to fall with this. But it was my opinion that the community and wanted a more definitive answer. rather than a guesstimate.
Okay.
You know, right now, you know, we've done some quick, you know, quick views of it, and we said, you know, maybe the facility is going to be about 40,000 square feet. You know, 21,000 for the fire, 23,000 for police, and then combined with efficiencies, we round it to 40. That's the best that we can do right now. And then I just take that 40,000, I multiply it by the square foot numbers of the last job that we completed, and then I add a fluff factor to that. That's the best that anybody could do for you right now. And I'm not sure that you want to be bringing that level of information, that minimal level of information to a community,
Right.
because they're going to stand there and say, I want to know more. I need to know more. And unfortunately, without investing some design funds, we can't tell you more than that. So it's really your call. I mean, and I hate to see you put it off. We're looking at 5% annual escalation. So every day we don't work, the cost goes up. But if you feel that it's necessary to bring it to annual town meeting, everything we've done up to this point is getting prepared for this. So we basically put everybody on hold until until you give us the approval to start.
I think if the board's amenable to a possible compromise solution for the time being, perhaps we table this for a week, we request the building committee meet, they digest everything, give a recommendation. Gil and Brendan can meet with their committees, they can revisit their opinions based on this additional information, and we can bring it for another discussion and a potential vote next week. But obviously that's going to push back town meeting, but instead of potentially pushing it back to May, maybe it's a week or two. That way we're continuing on with the dialogue. It's allowing people to clean up the areas of communication that clearly broke down. It gives the board some additional time to digest it and potentially get some more information and feedback.
I think that's a good compromise, Mr. Chairman, and I did say that I did want to hear from the Finance Committee, too,
Yes.
so their recommendation.
Yep.
Thank you.
I would second, is that a motion, Pat?
If you need a motion?
I would like,
Sure,
yeah.
I'll make that motion.
I will second the motion, but I do have a question I would like to ask.
Sure.
Mr. Andre, as part of the building committee, since you're the spokesperson here, I guess.
I'm the spokesperson for myself.
Okay, well, who's going to speak for the building committee then?
Who's the chair of the building committee?
Where,
Right there.
here he is, Mr. Chair. Just one very simple question. How close are you to the Borden Colony acquisition?
No closer than we were when we first started, but Mr. Andre put some plans together. I've showed them to several engineers so that we can actually get that on a professional plan.
Okay, but you have to hire an engineer to do that, correct?
We have to hire an engineer. Without that, we can't get the plan
and
made.
the legislature, as I've said time and time again, is not going to approve just a conceptual proposal, especially when you're dealing with agricultural land that's
Well,
been...
we were told by Mary what the legislature would or would not approve, so therefore you have to get all those.
So again, time is of the essence as far as what she told us. So we need to get engaged in an engineer so that we can have some kind of a plan drawn so that we can present it to the state. Without a plan, they don't even want to look at it.
Well, do you have an idea of what this engineer is going to cost? Roughly. I mean, I don't want dollars and cents in that sense.
So we got one estimate back. It's very, very low. Waiting for two more.
Okay.
I would say when we're all said and done, probably a few $1,000s.
Okay.
Less
Well,
than
maybe you
less than
would,
five.
maybe before you meet next, you'll have that information to go along with what the recommendation from the board would be just now.
I'll do my best. I'll reach out to them every couple of days looking for estimates, but it's difficult to
Okay.
get people to respond.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Mr. Waters?
That's my only thought is, if we do need that, and that is something that in order to get the land we do need, then maybe if we don't close this,
Well, and that, yeah, exactly.
we can add it to the warrant.
So part of the discussion that the building committee did have when the representative from Senator Pacheco's office came before the committee was going forward and engaging or determining how much engineering would cost, as well as going forward and locating, I believe the building committee recommended a real estate attorney for me to pursue. I did reach out to that attorney. But again, when Bob and I sat down with Rick, and well, even before that, Mike came into my office and said, by the way, if you're to expend any money on this project, you have to move it out of the stabilization fund into by a town meeting. And I believe at that point I either approached our town accountant or again asked Mike, well, does this project have any funding as of right now? Where can we pay for the attorney for the meets and bounds survey? Where can we pull money from for the engineer? And the answer was no money has been allocated. The only money that has been allocated so far was the money for the fire department project, and that is all spent.
Okay.
So again, this is another reason how this process got to this point.
Okay. All right. Anything else? There's a motion and a second on the table. Gil, did you raise your hand? No. Oh, okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody.